Tell me, have you ever noticed that the moment you stop chasing love, love strangely begins to chase you? Have you ever wondered why a man can sit across from you today, acting as if your presence is optional, and yet months later, he finds himself haunted by the very energy he thought he could replace? Here is the paradox. A woman becomes unforgettable the moment she stops trying to be remembered. Stay with me, because when you finish listening to this, you will realize something powerful. You were never the one who needed to be chosen. You were the one who needed to remember who you are. 1. The return begins with silence. There is a peculiar kind of silence that isn't empty at all. It isn't cold, nor is it a punishment. It is the kind of silence a woman steps into when she finally understands that her worth is not up for negotiation. It is the kind of silence that carries a soft but unshakable truth. You do not need noise to be powerful. For so long, you were conditioned to believe that relationships survive through constant explanation. If I explain myself clearly enough, he'll understand. If I tell him how I feel one more time, maybe he'll treat me differently. If I show him how much I care, he will not leave. But your heart already knows the truth. Understanding never comes from repetition. It comes from realization. And realization rarely blooms in noise. It blooms in silence. When you stop talking, something inside you realigns. Something inside you finds its center again. Your energy, once scattered across moments of pleading and proving, slowly returns home. And the strange thing is, your silence doesn't just change you, it changes him. Because when you stop chasing clarity from someone who benefits from your confusion, you disrupt the comfort he built around your availability. Suddenly, he can no longer rely on the familiar rhythm, your instant replies, your gentle reminders, your warmth waiting like a lamp left on at midnight. Silence confronts him with something he has avoided for a long time, the consequences of his choices. And consequences echo louder than any words you could have said. A man who once dismissed your tears begins to wonder why you no longer cry. A man who once ignored your calls begins to feel the weight of your absence. A man who once believed you would never leave suddenly finds himself staring into the space where your presence used to be. Your silence becomes a mirror, and mirrors are frightening. Not because they reveal what is beautiful, but because they reveal what has been neglected. He begins to feel the quiet differently. At first he calls it distance, then he calls it attitude, then he calls it change. But eventually he recognizes it. It is the sound of a woman reclaiming her self-respect. And here's the quiet twist: silence does not make a woman weak. Silence makes her unforgettable. Not because she has vanished, but because she has finally stopped giving her energy to things that drain her. When you stop talking, you stop supplying excuses for his behavior. When you stop explaining, you stop softening the truth he needs to face. When you stop reaching out, you stop feeding the illusion that he has time. Nothing awakens a man faster than losing access to a woman he thought would always be there. Because silence is not just the absence of sound. Bar silence is the presence of truth. And truth has a gravity that cannot be ignored. He starts to remember moments he overlooked. He recalls how you laughed that day in the kitchen, the way your eyes brightened when you talked about your dreams, but the warmth of your presence that he mistook for something permanent. Memory becomes a form of punishment and a form of awakening. Your silence becomes the first chapter of his realization. Yet silence is only the beginning of this inner shift. Because when a woman becomes silent, her energy begins to move. BR. And that movement carries a power that is far greater than the words she once spoke. And this brings us to the next truth. A truth that quietly unfolds in the spaces you no longer fill. Bar 2. Your energy withdraws before your door begins subtly. Before you physically pull away, but your spirit shifts. Your intuition whispers before your footsteps ever leave. Your energy retreats long before your body does. He feels it, not because you announce it, but because energy speaks louder than conversation. You no longer lean into his presence with the same softness. You no longer anticipate his needs before he knows them himself. You no longer wrap your world around his moods, hoping he will finally see your effort. Your energy steps back one breath at a time. Not abruptly, not in anger, but in a quiet reclaiming of space. A gentle reshaping of boundaries. A serene, steady unraveling of the emotional thread that once tied you to him. What he used to feel as warmth becomes different, lighter, distant, airy where it used to be solid. He reaches for the old you, the predictable softness, the constant availability, but finds someone far more grounded standing in her place. You begin choosing yourself in small moments, the reply that takes a little longer, the silence that lingers after a disrespectful comment, the absence of emotional labor you used to give effortlessly. Energy does not deceive, energy reveals. And he knows, even before he admits it, that something is changing. Because when a woman's energy shifts, her presence shifts. Her voice changes. Her eyes tell different stories. Her laughter carries new boundaries. He senses that the emotional safety he once took for granted is no longer guaranteed. Your energy is no longer kneeling, no longer begging to be understood, no longer bending to fit the shape of someone who never learned to cherish what he held. You rise, but you rise inwardly, the kind of rise that doesn't need noise, the kind of rise that makes the ground shake without a single stomp, the kind of rise that replaces fear with certainty. And ironically, this is what begins to pull him back. He doesn't miss your body first. He misses your energy. He misses the peace you brought. He misses the version of himself he could access through you. He misses the lightness he felt when you cared for him. He misses the gentle, intuitive way you understood without demanding. He misses the emotional shelter you provided without ever asking for shelter in return. He misses what he believed he could find anywhere, but cannot, because another woman can occupy his time, but she cannot duplicate your frequency. She can mimic your smile, but she cannot replicate the way you healed him without touching him. She can share his bed, but she cannot share his soul. Energy is unique, and yours is irreplaceable. When your energy withdraws, he feels a subtle emptiness creeping into his everyday life. Not enough to break him yet, but enough to unsettle him. He begins to pay attention. He begins to wonder. He begins to evaluate the difference between presence and connection. Your energy withdrawal becomes the second awakening. But the journey doesn't end here. Because energy withdrawal does something even more profound. It dissolves the pressure he once felt, and in that space, something unexpected emerges. And this soft but powerful shift leads us into the next unfolding truth. 3. Attraction reignites when pressure disappears. There's a strange paradox in human relationships. People do not resist love, they resist pressure. And sometimes, without realizing it, you loved him with so much intensity, so much devotion, so much hope, that your presence became the very thing he took for granted. Not because you were unworthy, but because you were constant. When love becomes constant, the human mind stops seeing it as sacred. It begins to assume, it begins to expect, it begins to overlook. But when you shift, when the pressure evaporates, he begins to breathe again. Not because he needed space from you, but because he needed space from the weight of his own immaturity. He needed the absence of expectation to finally see the value of the woman who expected nothing but honesty, presence, and respect. When you detach, you do not become cold, you become clear. And clarity is magnetic. He begins to feel something he has not felt in a long time, curiosity. He wonders what changed. He wonders what you're thinking. He wonders why your energy now feels calmer instead of anxious, centered, instead of desperate, freer instead of entangled. Your detachment, paradoxically, makes him feel safe enough to lean in again. He no longer feels the weight of your expectations on his shoulders. He no longer feels like your happiness depends on him. He no longer feels the pressure to be something he hasn't grown into yet. In the absence of pressure, desire returns. In the absence of need, attraction rises. In the absence of emotional dependency, connection breathes again. He begins to move toward you. Not because you're chasing beer, but because you're no longer standing in the doorway blocking his view of what life looks like without you. He sees you now, not as the woman who waits, but as the woman who walks. Not as the woman who pleads, but as the woman who glows. Not as the woman who fears losing him, but as the woman who knows she never needed him to be whole. Your detachment becomes a silent invitation, not for him to return, but for him to rise, for him to step into the fullness of who he must become, if he hopes to stand beside a woman who has rediscovered her own power. It is in this shift, this gentle but undeniable shift, that his heart begins to awaken. It is not your need that pulls him back, but your freedom. And as this realization settles into his spirit, a deeper understanding begins to pull him forward, one that will set the stage for everything that follows. Because attraction reborn in freedom becomes devotion reborn in truth. 4. The power of non-reaction. There comes a moment in every woman's journey when she realizes that not every action deserves a reaction, and not every provocation deserves her peace. It is a strange transition at first, to go from explaining, defending, clarifying, proving, to simply observing, to watch words that once pierced you fall away like raindrops sliding off a stone, to feel emotions that once ignited storms inside you settle into a quiet pool of clarity. Non-reaction is not coldness. Non-reaction is not indifference. It is mastery. It is the calm presence that rises after you finally understand that someone else's chaos cannot steal your inner balance unless you hand it over. Once upon a time, you reacted to everything. A tone, a comment, a shift of mood, a message unanswered, a promise broken. Your heart lived in a state of constant alertness, waiting for the next disappointment, the next confusion, the next emotional tremor. But the woman you are becoming has begun to breathe differently. She no longer jumps at shadows. She no longer pours emotion into empty spaces. She no longer dances to the rhythm of someone else's inconsistency. And here is the silent transformation. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding what no longer deserves your energy. A man who once controlled the dynamic through unpredictability suddenly finds himself unsure. A man who once tested your limits now realizes you are not even in the room where the game is being played. Your non-reaction becomes the echo of your self-respect. Not because you are trying to win, not because you are playing mind games, but because you have stepped into a deeper understanding. A person cannot shake a woman who has learned to anchor herself. Your non-reaction speaks a language he cannot ignore. It tells him you are no longer emotionally tied to his behavior. It tells him you have stopped seeking validation from someone who withheld it. It tells him you have stepped into a version of yourself that he no longer recognizes, yet cannot forget. He wonders why the things that used to unsettle you no longer move you. He wonders why you no longer defend yourself against accusations that were never rooted in truth. He wonders why you no longer chase explanations from someone who never offered clarity. In your non-reaction, he feels consequences that no argument could ever deliver, because silence may awaken a man, but non-reaction humbles him. And humility rearranges the heart far deeper than regret. Your calm becomes his discomfort. Your stillness becomes his confrontation. Your peace becomes his mirror. And the more he looks into that mirror, the more he sees a reflection of what he mishandled. But this calm, this silence, this non-reaction It isn't just about him. It is about you remembering who you were before the noise. It is about you stepping back into your inner sanctuary and realizing something profound. Your peace is your power. And this power, once reclaimed, does not stay still. It starts to move through every layer of your life. It softens your spirit while strengthening your boundaries. It makes you radiant in a way that is not loud but undeniable. This new calm does something even more transformative. It begins to shift how you see relationships altogether. Because once you master non-reaction, you begin to understand a deeper truth. A truth that pulls you toward a new realization, waiting in the next chapter of your becoming. 5. Confidence is the true gravity bar. There is a kind of confidence that has nothing to do with appearance, and everything to do with presence. It is the confidence that rises when you finally understand your own emotional worth, when you no longer beg anyone to choose you, when your soul stops apologizing for how deeply it loves, and starts celebrating how deeply it knows. This confidence is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not demand attention, but it pulls the world toward it, quietly, inevitably, like gravity. You begin to walk differently, not with arrogance, but with alignment, not with superiority, but with certainty. The world feels you before it sees you. Your energy arrives in the room before your footsteps do. Your presence speaks before your lips form a single word. This is a kind of confidence that is born from letting go of what was never yours to carry, letting go of emotional burdens that were disguised as love, letting go of expectations that drained your spirit, letting go of a version of yourself that tolerated too much because she believed she was not enough. But the truth is, you were always enough. You were simply loving from a place of unhealed hope. And now, you are loving from a place of awakened worth. This shift does something remarkable. It changes the emotional atmosphere around you. Men feel it. People feel it. Life itself rearranges when you step into this inner gravity. A man who once overlooked your presence now feels your absence as a void and your return as a blessing. A man who once treated your energy casually now feels himself drawn toward you without understanding why. He is not attracted to the old you, the one who waited, chased, explained. He is drawn to the you who has risen. Confidence is a strange force. It does not pull people closer because you want them, but because you no longer need them. And this is where the shift becomes undeniable. Your detachment makes you magnetic. He feels something he cannot name. A subtle longing, a discomfort, a curiosity, a desire to understand the woman you are becoming, because the woman you were is no longer available for the same patterns. He sees you smiling differently, not with the desperation of wanting him to stay, but with the serenity of knowing you will be fine, whether he stays or not. He sees you speaking differently, not from insecurity, but from intention, not from fear, but from wisdom, not from longing, but from truth. This confidence becomes the quiet turning point, because nothing makes a man reconsider his choices, like the moment he realizes the woman he once thought he could lose without consequence is no longer waiting for him to realize her worth. That realization does not just awaken him, it pulls him. It pulls him toward you. It pulls him toward accountability. It pulls him toward growth. But your confidence is not for him. It is for you. It is the foundation of the life you are building, with or without his presence in it. And this confidence does something profoundly spiritual. It creates space for something deeper to surface inside you, something that invites you into the next awakening, the next layer of your becoming, the truth that unfolds in the next keynote. 6. You become the one he cannot replace. There is a moment, not planned, not forced, not designed, when a woman becomes irreplaceable, This moment happens quietly, often without her even noticing. It happens when she rises out of the ashes of disappointment, carrying the glow of wisdom instead of the weight of resentment. It happens when she no longer desires to be chosen, but chooses herself. When she no longer attaches her worth to someone's presence, but to her own alignment. When she no longer performs for love, but embodies love from within. A woman becomes irreplaceable the moment she stops trying to prove her value and begins living in it. Because there is a difference between a woman who wants a man and a woman who knows she is a gift. When you reach this level of self-understanding, you stop fighting for a spot in someone's life. You stop begging for bare minimum affection. You stop explaining how you deserve to be treated. You simply embody the truth. And the truth speaks louder than your requests ever did. This embodiment creates a presence that cannot be replicated. Not by someone new, not by someone temporary, not by someone convenient. Because what made you powerful was never your looks, never your effort, never your sacrifice. What made you powerful was your heart, your depth, your intuition, your softness wrapped in strength, your ability to feel deeply and still rise after being broken. It is this combination, this intricate blend of vulnerability and resilience that makes you unforgettable. He begins to realize that you were not just a woman in his life. You were the woman who brought meaning to it. You were the one who made him feel capable of becoming more. You were the one who offered emotional safety without demanding perfection. You were the one who saw potential in him that even he could not see. You were not replaceable. You were foundational, and foundations are not easily forgotten. This realization does not strike him all at once. It unfolds slowly, like a sunrise creeping across a quiet horizon. It visits him in the small moments, when he hears a song that reminds him of you, when he faces a challenge you used to help him through, when he laughs at something and instinctively looks for you, when he reaches for companionship and finds emptiness, when he seeks emotional connection and discovers that the world is full of people but empty of presence, your presence. He begins to understand that he can meet many people but still lose the one who mattered. He begins to understand that he can share conversations but never again find the depth you offered effortlessly. He begins to realize that connection without soul is nothing but company, and company without alignment is nothing but noise. You were not noise. You were harmony. You were not an option. You were the moment his life had meaning. You were not interchangeable. You were the chapter he did not know how to write until it ended. And the ending is what opens his eyes, because a man rarely understands the value of depth when he is standing in front of it. But he understands it painfully when he is standing outside of it. And this realization that you are not only irreplaceable but unforgettable becomes the turning point that changes the way he sees everything. But here is the pivotal truth. You did not become irreplaceable so he would return. You became irreplaceable because you finally returned to yourself. And this return is only the beginning. Because the woman who knows she is irreplaceable is about to discover an even deeper truth, waiting in the next unfolding of her becoming. 7. Keynote 7. When a woman stops chasing, she returns to her power. There comes a moment in a woman's life, a quiet moment, almost unnoticeable to the world, where she puts her hands down, unclenches her heart, and simply stops running after anything or anyone. Not because she no longer cares, not because she has lost interest, but because she finally remembers who she is when she is not begging to be understood, chosen, or held. This moment, this turning of the soul, is not loud. It does not announce itself with fireworks or thunder. It arrives gently, like the way dawn meets the earth before anyone wakes. And without realizing it, a woman who once poured herself into explaining, proving, justifying, and overextending, suddenly breathes differently. She stands differently. Her heart beats with a new rhythm, a rhythm not of fear, but of recognition. Because when a woman stops chasing a man, She isn't walking away from love. She is walking toward clarity, toward self-respect, toward alignment with what her soul has been whispering all along. You are not meant to be an option in the story where you give everything. In the space created by silence, she discovers truths she had buried beneath her hope. She sees the places where she compromised her authenticity. She feels the exhaustion of carrying what was never hers to hold, and she realizes, with a soft, powerful exhale, that she was the one sustaining what was already crumbling. This is the beginning of a woman's return to herself. No more overthinking, no more replaying conversations, no more doubting her worth, no more bending just to be enough for someone who never intended to hold her fully. When she stops chasing, life rearranges itself. The unnecessary falls away. The heavy loosens its grip. Her mind clears. Her spirit rises. Her dignity gathers itself and sits boldly on her shoulders again. It is here, in this reclaimed quietness, that something beautiful happens. She hears her own voice again. The voice she silenced for too long while listening to the stories, excuses, and half-promises of someone who didn't see her depth. And the more she listens to herself, the less she seeks validation from someone else. She rediscovers the things that used to make her whole. Her passions, her peace, her dreams, her laugh, her softness, her strength. She begins to glow again, slowly at first, then unmistakably. Because nothing brightens a woman more than remembering she was never meant to dim in the first place. And strangely, ironically, this is the very moment a man begins to feel her absence. Not the absence of her physical presence, but the absence of her emotional availability, the absence of her effort, the absence of her consistent presence in his life. He feels the shift. He senses the withdrawal. He notices the silence. And for the first time, he must face himself, without her energy rescuing him from the emptiness he has been avoiding. But this keynote is not about him. It is about her reclaiming her center. And as she rises quietly and gracefully, something inside her awakens. A calm confidence that does not need to chase, because what is aligned will meet her, and what is real will choose her without hesitation. And just when she thinks her journey ends here, something deeper begins to unfold. Because once a woman stops chasing, the next revelation is even more powerful. The revelation of what or who was truly chasing her all along. 8. Keynote 8. When she returns to herself, he returns to his truth. When a woman comes back to herself, the entire dynamic shifts, not through force, not through manipulation, but through the natural gravity of authenticity. There is something undeniable about a woman grounded in her own essence. She doesn't demand attention, she attracts it. She doesn't argue her worth, she embodies it. She doesn't beg for love, she becomes the kind of love that cannot be ignored. And when she stands in this alignment, a man, whether he expected it or not, must confront the reality he once overlooked. Not because she punishes him with silence, but because her silence reveals everything. A woman in her power shines a light that exposes the gaps in others. Where she was once the bridge, she is now the mirror. Where she was once the one reaching out, she is now the one receiving truth. He begins to feel the difference. He recognizes what her energy once added to his life. Not the drama, not the expectation, not the pressure, but the presence, the warmth, the steadiness, the guidance he did not value because it was always there. When she stops filling the spaces he neglected, those spaces echo. The echo is loud. It disrupts. It awakens. He begins to ask questions he avoided. Why did I push away someone who only wanted to love me? Why did I take for granted the heart that would have stayed? What was I so afraid of giving? Why? And suddenly, he realizes that she wasn't asking for too much. She was asking for the bare minimum from someone who wasn't ready to give even that. But love has a strange way of softening and sharpening at the same time. It softens her from bitterness, and it sharpens him with awareness. Yet the purpose of this keynote is not judgment, it is understanding. Because as she grows into her truth, He grows into his clarity. And sometimes that clarity leads him back to her, not in desperation, but in recognition. Recognition of her value, recognition of his immaturity, recognition of the gap between who he was and who he now wishes to be. But here lies the twist. When he returns to his truth, he does not return to the same version of her. He returns to the woman who no longer waits. He returns to the woman who no longer lowers her standards. He returns to the woman who has built a life without depending on his presence. And now he must decide. Will he rise to the level she stands at? Or will he watch her continue forward without him? Because the power has shifted. Not in a battle of egos, but in the balance of alignment. A woman aligned with her truth becomes the test of a man's intention. Not by accusing him, but by simply being herself. And just as one truth is revealed, another begins to whisper beneath the surface. For when a woman embodies her truth, the next transformation is not about what he does, but about how the entire world begins to respond to her. 9. Keynote 9. When she rises, the world rearranges around her. There is a sacred moment in every spiritual journey when a woman's inner evolution becomes so profound that life itself begins to shift around her. People sense her differently. Environments respond differently. Even circumstances that once felt heavy begin to soften or dissolve. This is the moment where alignment turns to ascension. Because when a woman truly rises, not in ego, not in pretense, but in deep, silent, grounded confidence, the world must adjust its shape to accommodate the new frequency she carries. She stops being available for confusion. She stops entertaining half-love. She stops accepting crumbs from tables she was meant to build herself. She walks with a new stillness. A stillness that speaks louder than her words ever did. Her presence becomes a filter. Anything not meant for her simply falls away. Anything aligned with her rises to meet her. This is not magic. This is spiritual law. When the mind stops chasing, the heart stops breaking. When the heart stops breaking, the soul stops shrinking. When the soul stops shrinking, a woman remembers her original proportion. Expansive, radiant, purposeful, and this expansion changes everything. Her conversations shift, her priorities shift, her vision sharpens, her energy becomes selective, intentional, undistracted. Where she once felt the need to prove herself, she now feels the freedom to be herself. Where she once tolerated inconsistency, she now expects reciprocity. Where she once settled for potential, she now chooses presence. Where she once chased love, she now attracts love. Real love, grounded love, committed love. Not because she demands it, but because she embodies it. And the world responds to her in the same measure she responds to herself. But here's the deeper truth. The more she rises, the more she becomes a catalyst for change in others. People begin to treat her with more respect, not because she asked for it, but because she carries herself like someone who deserves it. People begin to listen to her differently, not because she speaks louder, but because her silence is now more powerful than her explanations ever were. People begin to follow her lead, not because she pushes them, but because her footsteps leave a trail of clarity behind her. And the man who once took her for granted, he sees it too. He sees the shift. He sees the transformation. He sees the way the world honors what he overlooked. This is where his deeper awakening begins. An awakening not driven by jealousy or fear, but by recognition of what a woman becomes. When she finally stops abandoning herself, her rising doesn't diminish him. It challenges him. It calls him higher. It invites him into a version of himself he has long avoided. But this keynote, this final unfolding, is not about whether he answers that call. It is about her becoming the kind of woman whose life no longer depends on someone else's decision. The kind of woman who no longer waits for permission to shine. The kind of woman who knows that love is not found by chasing, but by being rooted enough for the right love to find her. And just when it seems her transformation is complete, another truth is rising on the horizon. A truth even more profound. waiting to be revealed. Because after a woman rises, something extraordinary begins to happen. And the next chapter is where her true destiny unfolds. 10. Keynote 10. When her spirit becomes still, she sees what was invisible before. There is a silence a woman steps into after she has risen. A sacred kind of silence, untouched by the noise she used to entertain, unshaken by the chaos she once allowed inside her. It is the silence after the storm, the breath after years of holding too much, the stillness that only arrives once the soul has grown tired of explaining itself to those who were never listening. In this quiet space, she begins to perceive what was hidden in plain sight, the intentions of people, the patterns she repeated, the weight she carried that was never hers, the truths she ignored in the name of hope, and most importantly, the guidance life was whispering all along. Clarity does not come when the world is loud. Clarity comes when the woman is finally still. And in that stillness, she realizes something profound. The signs were always there. The warnings, the hesitations, the emotional discomfort she kept pushing through, the unanswered questions she silenced to maintain peace. She sees now that the soul speaks long before reality collapses. She just wasn't ready to listen. But now, she hears everything. She begins to understand why certain people drifted, why certain relationships felt heavy, why certain doors refused to open no matter how hard she knocked. She sees the threads of divine timing woven through every disappointment. She recognizes how every unanswered prayer was protection, how every delay was redirection, how every heartbreak was preparation. A woman who sits in stillness learns to read life the way others read books. Not with her eyes, but with her intuition. She starts noticing the subtle shifts. Who drains her, who nourishes her, who respects her boundaries, who tests them, who mirrors her growth, and who fears it. And as she observes all this with a calm heart, a new power begins to rise within her. The power of discernment. Discernment is not judgment. Discernment is spiritual sight. It is the ability to perceive the truth beneath the surface, the intention beneath the gesture, the pattern beneath the behavior. And once a woman starts seeing with discernment, she no longer accepts people at their words. She accepts them at their actions. The stiller she becomes, the sharper her awareness grows. She can feel when someone is sincere. She can sense when someone is pretending. She can recognize when someone values her. She can detect when someone is merely benefiting from her. And once she sees these truths, something remarkable happens. She is no longer afraid to let go. Not because she is detached, but because she is aligned. She understands now that what is meant for her cannot be taken from her, and what is not meant for her cannot be forced into place. But as her spirit becomes still, another transformation rises. A transformation that takes her from clarity into something far more powerful. Because eventually, stillness doesn't just help her see, it teaches her to choose. 11. Keynote 11. Once she learns to choose, she no longer accepts anything that diminishes her. After clarity comes choice. And for a woman who has survived her own storms, choice becomes sacred. She no longer chooses from loneliness. She chooses from alignment. She no longer chooses from fear. She chooses from self-worth. She no longer chooses from desperation. She chooses from overflow. And this shift changes the entire trajectory of her life. She begins choosing peace over chaos, even when chaos feels familiar. She chooses consistency over intensity, even when intensity feels exciting. She chooses effort over excuses, even when excuses sound comforting. She chooses accountability over charm, even when charm feels flattering. She realizes that the wrong things were draining her, not because they were powerful, but because she kept giving them permission. And once she takes that permission back, her world rearranges. Where she once tolerated unclear intentions, she now seeks transparency. Where she once entertained emotional immaturity, she now values emotional intelligence. Where she once poured into half connections, she now invests in mutual devotion. Where she once lowered her standards out of hope, she now holds them out of self-respect. She has learned that choosing someone is not the same as choosing herself. And choosing herself is not selfishness. It is survival. It is sovereignty. It is spiritual alignment. She stops giving discounts to people who have not earned access. She stops apologizing for her boundaries. She stops shrinking to make someone else comfortable. She stops engaging in conversations that contradict her growth. Her choices become deliberate, intentional, weighted with wisdom. Every yes carries purpose. Every no carries protection. And through this empowered choosing, she becomes the architect of her future. She designs her life with the materials she once gave away. She builds her emotional home with the bricks of self-awareness. She protects her peace the way someone protects a sacred temple. But as she learns to choose with intention, another revelation unfolds. A revelation that deepens her journey beyond relationships, beyond others, into a place even she once feared to enter. Because once a woman masters choosing, a new chapter begins. The chapter where she learns to choose herself even when it is difficult. 12. Keynote 12. When she chooses herself, her life transforms in ways she never imagined. There is a difference between knowing your worth and choosing yourself. Many women know their worth. Few are brave enough to honor it. Choosing yourself is not a decision you make once. It is a continuous unfolding, a daily returning, a profound commitment to be loyal to your own soul, even when it shakes up everything around you. Because choosing yourself means walking away from the familiar, even when it scares you, ending connections, even when you still care, letting go of roles, even when people disapprove, releasing versions of yourself, even when you don't know who you will become next. Choosing yourself requires courage, the kind of courage that grows from wounds that healed, but left wisdom behind. It is the courage to say, I will not abandon myself again. It is the courage to prioritize your peace over someone else's comfort. It is the courage to protect your emotional home from people who only visit when they need shelter, but disappear when it is time to build. And as she chooses herself, her energy transforms, her aura becomes clearer, her presence becomes more grounded, her decisions become uncompromising. She no longer begs for love, she becomes love. She no longer waits to be chosen. She chooses herself first and attracts those who recognize her value. She no longer fears abandonment. She realizes that losing others is never more painful than losing herself. And life responds to this shift with uncanny precision. Opportunities find her, people respect her, love meets her halfway, peace fills her life in places chaos once lived, and she realizes, perhaps for the first time, that choosing herself does not lead to loneliness. It leads to alignment. It leads to purpose. It leads to connections that nourish instead of drain. It leads to love that mirrors her growth instead of threatening it. But the most beautiful change of all is internal. She feels whole again, not because someone completed her, but because she stopped abandoning the parts of herself she once sacrificed for others. She feels powerful, not because she dominates life, but because she flows with it. She feels at peace, not because life is perfect, but because her soul finally is. And as this transformation completes its circle, another realization rises like dawn breaking through mountains. Because once a woman fully chooses herself, she becomes someone she was never before. Someone the world now has no choice but to rise to meet. 13. Keynote 13. When a woman stops chasing, energy reverses, and he feels the shift. There comes a moment in a woman's journey where something inside her simply releases. Not with anger, not with bitterness, not with dramatic closure or final words. but with a quiet inner knowing that whispers, enough. This chapter no longer honors who I am becoming. And the moment she listens to that whisper, something ancient, something sacred within her energy begins to shift. Because chasing is not just a behavior. Chasing is a vibration. It is the subtle energy of reaching outward instead of standing inward. It is the posture of leaning forward instead of leaning into oneself. It is the unconscious belief that what she desires is always slightly out of reach, a belief that she must pursue, prove, or perform to earn what was never meant to be forced. But when a woman stops chasing, she stops performing for love. She stops negotiating for affection. She stops sacrificing her peace for crumbs. Her entire frequency recalibrates. She no longer radiates longing. She radiates presence. She no longer vibrates with the fear of losing him. She vibrates with the confidence of not losing herself. And in this energy reversal, the dynamic between them transforms. Because whether he understands it or not, whether he consciously notices or not, he feels it. He feels the absence of her emotional reach. He feels the drop in her anxiety. He feels the cooling of her urgency. He feels the quiet in her heart, where once she kept trying to prove she was worthy of staying in his. And this is the moment that confuses him, not because she walked away, but because she stopped participating in the emotional dance that kept him in a position of power. She no longer texts first. She no longer waits by the phone. She no longer interprets mixed signals. She no longer carries conversations on her back to keep a connection alive that he barely watered. She steps back, and the moment she steps back, he feels the gravitational pull shift. A man may not understand emotion the way she does, but he feels energy with a precision he cannot articulate. He feels the difference between a woman who needs him and a woman who chooses him. He feels the difference between a woman who fears losing him and a woman who is no longer afraid to lose anything that costs her inner peace. And suddenly, he begins to notice things he overlooked before. Her grace, her depth, her softness, her silence, her effort, her absence. In the stillness she creates, his mind begins to replay memories he once took for granted. Her laughter that used to brighten the dull spaces of his life. Her presence that brought calm to his restless edges. Her devotion that wrapped around him in ways he never acknowledged. Her availability that he expected without gratitude. Her patience that he confused for permanence. Now, without her chasing, he is confronted with the truth he never had to face before. She was the constant. She was the anchor. She was the emotional home he never learned how to cherish. And as this realization sinks into him, it stirs something deeper than regret. It stirs longing. Because a man does not crave the woman who runs after him. He craves the woman whose presence feels like home, but whose absence feels like a void he cannot fill elsewhere. And the moment he feels that void, a new awareness dawns within him. He begins to search for her energy. He checks his phone more often. He replays old conversations. He stalks her silence like a man unsure of how to interpret it. He tries to understand this strange new feeling. The feeling of not being needed. The feeling of not being chased. The feeling of being the one left wondering. And this irony, this emotional reversal, is not an act of manipulation from her. It is a natural shift that occurs when a woman stops abandoning herself to keep someone else. For the first time, he is the one experiencing uncertainty. For the first time, he is the one feeling the gap between them widen. For the first time, he feels the consequences of his own inconsistency. And yet, the most powerful part is not what he feels, it is what she becomes. Because when a woman stops chasing, she doesn't just walk away from him. She walks toward herself. And in walking toward herself, she discovers something even deeper, even more transformative, even more magnetic than letting go. She discovers the power of being emotionally unavailable to anything that does not grow her. Transition. And that revelation leads her straight into the next awakening. 14. Keynote 14. Her emotional unavailability becomes her greatest power. There is a profound, subtle power in a woman who becomes emotionally unavailable to what once wounded her. Not cold, not bitter, not guarded out of fear, but unavailable out of clarity. Unavailable because she has finally understood that her emotions are sacred currency and she will no longer invest them in anything that yields no spiritual return. At first, emotional unavailability may sound like detachment, but it is not detachment. It is evolution. It is the quiet refusal to entertain connections that drain her life force. It is the silent boundary that needs no announcement because its presence speaks for itself. It is the inner shift. When her heart becomes selective, her mind becomes sharper, and her soul becomes unapproachable to the chaos she once tolerated. This new version of her is not hardened, she is refined. She has walked through her own shadows long enough to understand that not everyone deserves access to her light. Where she once gave explanations, she now gives silence. Where she once gave second chances, she now gives distance. Where she once gave emotional labor, she now gives responsibility back to those who created their own messes. And this transformation is not just felt by her. It is felt by every man who ever underestimated her, especially the man who once felt entitled to her attention. He senses the wall before she ever builds it. Not the wall of bitterness, but the wall of sovereignty. She no longer reacts instantly. She no longer justifies her emotions. She no longer exposes her wounds to someone who is not capable of healing their own. He feels her emotional absence in the space where her warmth used to be. He feels her unavailability in the pauses where her reassurance once lived. He feels her indifference in the silence where her hope used to echo. And this indifference, it touches a man in a way anger never could. Anger means she still cares. Silence means she has outgrown the conversation. Her emotional unavailability becomes a mirror, reflecting his own lack of effort. It forces him to see himself, not through her forgiving eyes, but through the eyes of consequence. And this realization awakens in him a fear deeper than losing her. The fear that someone else may now receive the side of her he took for granted, because emotional unavailability is not about shutting the world out. It is about creating space for what is worthy to enter. In her emotional withdrawal, she becomes selective, and in her selectiveness, she becomes powerful. Her energy becomes rare. Her attention becomes valuable. Her love becomes something that must be earned, not assumed. She is no longer moved by promises, only by proof. She is no longer swayed by charm, only by character. She is no longer softened by sweet words, only by consistent action. And this shift, this evolution, this reclaiming of emotional sovereignty, it does something to a man. It makes him rethink everything. He wonders, who is she becoming without me? Why does she feel further away each day? Why does her absence feel louder than her presence ever did? And the answer is simple. She has returned to herself. She has become unavailable to the version of him that refused to grow, unavailable to the dynamic that once drained her, unavailable to the love that did not honor her. And as she rises into this new level, life begins aligning her with people who match her depth, her effort, her emotional intelligence, her spiritual maturity. But before she receives them, she must walk through one final realization, a realization that completes her transformation and turns her emotional unavailability into an unshakable foundation. Because the moment she becomes unavailable to the wrong people, she becomes irresistible to the right ones. 15. The emotional bond reopens through absence. There comes a moment in every connection where silence begins to speak louder than any conversation ever could. Not because silence is empty, but because silence reveals what noise has been hiding. When you step back, when you withdraw your presence, when you pull your energy inward like the tide returning to the moon's pull, something profound begins to happen inside the heart of the man who took your nearness for granted. What once felt familiar suddenly feels rare. What once felt accessible now becomes distant, and what once felt secure begins to tremble with uncertainty. Absence doesn't merely create space, it creates awareness. It is in your absence that he begins to feel the emotional threads you carried so effortlessly. Threads he never noticed because they were woven into the everyday moments he assumed would always exist. But when you step back, he feels the loosened threads. He feels the subtle unraveling. He feels something slipping, something he can't name, something he can't replace. This is the strange paradox of human bonds. We often fail to appreciate what we are used to holding. But the moment the hand opens and the treasure is gone, the heart awakens to what it once ignored. Your absence becomes a mirror. A mirror he didn't ask for, but one he cannot escape. A mirror reflecting the truth of his own feelings, fears, and desires. And slowly something inside him starts to shift. He begins to notice things he once dismissed, the warmth in your voice, the softness in your presence, the steadiness of your support, the way you made his life feel less chaotic, simply by being there. In the stillness, in the quiet, in the emptiness where your energy once lived, the emotional bond begins to breathe again. Absence creates the conditions for longing, and longing creates the possibility of renewal. But this longing, it is not born from neediness. It is born from recognition. Recognition of what he didn't nurture. Recognition of what he didn't protect. Recognition of who you truly were and what your presence meant. You see, we often assume emotional bonds form through closeness. But closeness can sometimes blur the edges of appreciation. Closeness can make the extraordinary feel ordinary. Yet absence sharpens the edges. Absence restores the contrast. Absence brings the heart into focus. And when the heart sees clearly, something ancient inside us wakes. That instinctive knowing that some connections were never meant to be treated casually. That some souls enter our lives not as passing guests, but as sacred companions. And when such a soul steps back, the space they leave behind becomes impossible to ignore. He begins to replay your conversations, the jokes, the small gestures, the moments he rushed through, the moments he didn't honor, the moments he didn't understand. It starts with a small thought. I wonder what she's doing. Then it becomes a pull. Why hasn't she reached out? Then it becomes a discomfort. Why do I feel this uneasy? And then, when the emotional bond truly reopens, it becomes a longing that keeps tugging at him, even when he tries to distract himself, even when he tries to move on, even when he tells himself he doesn't care. He feels your absence like missing oxygen, unseen, intangible, but vital. He may not admit it to his friends, he may not confess it even to himself at first. But something inside him knows your absence reopened a door in him he didn't realize had closed. A door to vulnerability, a door to realization, a door to the truth of how much you meant. And he begins to understand. Some bonds are not destroyed by distance, they are revealed by it. Absence didn't weaken the emotional bond. It exposed it, it laid it bare, it made it honest, and it reawakened the part of him that finally sees the woman he lost touch with, not because she disappeared, but because he wasn't paying attention. But as this emotional bond reopens in him, something even more powerful begins to rise in you. A shift he never anticipated, a transformation he cannot ignore, a force that changes everything. And that leads us to something deeper, because the bond isn't the only thing that awakens in absence. Sometimes, self-respect becomes the very thing that turns the world around. 16. Your self-respect becomes magnetic. There is a moment in every woman's journey when she crosses an invisible threshold, a moment when she stops asking, stops proving, stops chasing, and begins to honor herself in a way she never has before. This is the moment when self-respect rises like a quiet, unstoppable sunrise, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. When you withdrew your presence, something happened inside you too. You didn't just create space in his mind, you created clarity in your soul. You began to see yourself differently, not as someone waiting, not as someone hoping, not as someone enduring, but as someone deserving of reciprocity, deserving of consistency, deserving of love that doesn't hesitate. And as this realization grows, something extraordinary happens. Your self-respect becomes magnetic. It shifts your energy without you trying. It changes your posture without you forcing. It transforms your aura without you announcing anything. People can feel it. Men especially can feel it. Self-respect is not arrogance. Self-respect is not pride. Self-respect is alignment. Alignment with who you are. Alignment with what you value. Alignment with the woman you are always becoming. When you honor yourself, the world begins to respond differently. Where you once tolerated excuses, you now require accountability. Where you once accepted crumbs, you now wait for a full meal. Where you once hid your feelings to be easy, you now speak your truth with grace. And men feel this shift in ways they cannot explain. Because a woman who respects herself is rare. A woman who respects herself is steady. A woman who respects herself becomes a mirror, reflecting back to a man what he must rise into if he hopes to stand beside her. This is why your absence reopened the emotional bond. But your self-respect activates something deeper, a sense of urgency in him. He senses that you are no longer available in the way you once were, no longer accessible in the way he assumed, no longer willing in the way he depended on. Your energy becomes less predictable but more powerful, less giving but more valuable, less present but more unforgettable. Because self-respect has a way of elevating a woman. It changes her voice, her priorities, her boundaries, her entire presence. And when a woman rises in self-respect, the dynamics of every relationship around her begin to shift. He starts to wonder if someone else will recognize what he overlooked. He starts to worry that you are moving forward internally even if you appear still. He starts to feel the gap between who he was and who he now needs to become. Your self-respect silently challenges him. If you want access to me, you must rise too. And this is why self-respect is magnetic. It doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't convince, it inspires. It doesn't demand, it grounds. A woman who carries self-respect becomes a force that draws only what aligns and repels what does not. And as you deepen into this new identity, you realize something profound. You no longer want a man who simply misses you. You want a man who values you. And you no longer want a bond that reopens only because you stepped away. You want a bond that thrives because both hearts show up. This is the sacred moment when you stop being impressed by his longing and start being moved only by his effort. Because longing is a feeling, effort is a choice, and you deserve the choices that honor you. Self-respect becomes the silent standard that reshapes your entire life. It tells the world what is allowed to stay near you and what must remain at a distance. And through this rise, through this deepening, through this awakening, you begin to see the truth. You are never waiting for him to realize your value. You are waiting to remember it yourself. But what comes next is the turning point few expect. Because once self-respect awakens, the type of love you attract changes forever. And now, the next understanding begins to whisper. Because what self-respect awakens next is a level of confidence that cannot be undone. 17. You step into your feminine power. There comes a moment when a woman stops waiting. Not because she has become cold or distant or numb, but because she has finally awakened to the truth that was sleeping inside her all along. The truth that her softness is not weakness. The truth that her heart is not a bargaining chip. The truth that her presence is a gift, not a debt owed to anyone. And when that realization rises in her like a silent sun, she steps into a feminine power without even trying. It begins quietly, not with loud declarations, not with dramatic changes, but with a shift so gentle that only she can truly feel it. A shift in how she talks to herself, a shift in what she accepts, a shift in how she sees her own value. And the first sign is this: she no longer bends herself into shapes that do not fit her soul. Where once she would shrink to avoid conflict, now she speaks with calm clarity. Where once she would overgive to feel chosen, now she gives from fullness, not fear. Where once she would cling to reassurance, now she trusts her own intuition more than another person's promises. This is the turning point. The moment she begins to honor her inner rhythm. The moment she finally lets herself be the woman she always knew she could be. Because feminine power is not loud. It is not aggressive. It is not a performance of confidence. It is the quiet knowledge that you deserve respect without pleading for it. It is the deep breath you take before responding. It is the softness you keep even when life has given you every reason to harden. It is the way your silence becomes stronger than your anger. The way your boundaries become stronger than your fears. The way your stillness becomes stronger than your need to be understood. And here is the most beautiful part. Feminine power naturally creates space. Space between you and the version of you who needed validation. Space between you and the people who couldn't see your worth. Space between you and the patterns you finally outgrew. In that space, something magical happens. You begin to see your own life from a higher place. As if you stepped out of the maze and suddenly realized you were never trapped. You were just learning the way out. And as you rise into this new energy, you begin to glow differently. Not the kind of glow that seeks attention, but the glow that comes from inner alignment. The glow of a woman who knows exactly who she is. People feel it before they understand it. They notice the shift but can't explain it. They sense the distance but can't name it. They feel your energy expanding even when you say nothing at all. This is the power that draws everything toward you, not because you are chasing, but because you have become magnetic by simply being. Because when a woman steps into her feminine power, she returns to her original design, to be receptive yet discerning, open-hearted yet grounded, connected yet sovereign. You become the woman who listens to her intuition without apology. You become the woman who moves with grace even in uncertainty. You become the woman who no longer negotiates her worth to keep someone close. And because of that, your presence becomes unmistakable. Your absence becomes undeniable. Your energy becomes unforgettable. Feminine power is not about being more than someone else. It is about finally being enough for yourself, and that changes everything. Because when you stand fully in who you are, life begins to rearrange itself around your truth. People who once took you for granted begin to realize what they lost. People who once assumed you'd always be there start to notice your distance. People who once dismissed your feelings suddenly remember every word you said. It's not revenge, it's resonance. When you elevate, the world responds. But with this new power comes a deeper understanding. One you didn't expect, one you didn't see coming. One that slowly begins to reshape your entire heart. A realization that whispers softly at first, but grows louder with every step you take into your own healing. A realization that leads you into the next truth, the one that changes you forever. 18. You realize you don't want him back anymore. There is a moment in every woman's healing where she looks at the past, and instead of feeling longing, she feels clarity. Instead of aching, she feels peace. Instead of wanting him back, she understands why life removed him. This moment does not come overnight. It arrives slowly, in small pieces, in subtle awakenings, in gentle unfoldings of wisdom inside the soul. At first, it feels like emptiness. You miss the memories, the dream of who you believed he could become, the connection you thought would last forever. But then something shifts. You stop replaying the good moments and start remembering the truth. You remember the nights you waited, the questions you swallowed, the tears you hid, the parts of yourself you silenced so he could feel comfortable. And with every memory that rises, you regain another piece of yourself. Piece by piece, heartbeat by heartbeat, you begin to understand. You are losing yourself, trying to keep someone who didn't know how to hold you. The realization doesn't come with anger. It comes with understanding. It comes with compassion for your old self, the version of you who didn't know better yet. You start to see that you weren't asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. You were offering oceans to someone afraid of depth. You were pouring love into hands that were never ready to hold it. And suddenly, your heart says something unexpected. I don't want to go back. Not because you hate him, not because you want revenge, but because you finally see yourself clearly. You see your growth. You see your peace. You see your newfound strength. You see the woman you have become through the very pain that once broke you. And when you stand in this clarity, you realize that wanting him back would require you to shrink again, to soften your boundaries, to silence your intuition, to abandon the woman you have just learned to love. You realize that the relationship you once mourned cannot survive the woman you are becoming. Your healing has taken you somewhere he cannot follow. Your evolution has led you somewhere he cannot reach. It dawns on you. You were never meant to return. You were meant to rise. And the strange thing is, the moment you no longer want him back is the moment he begins to remember you. It is often when your silence grows deep, when your energy becomes whole, when your heart becomes grounded again, that the past comes knocking. But this time, you answer differently. You are no longer the woman who needs closure. You are no longer the woman who needs validation. You are no longer the woman who needs someone's presence to feel worthy. You have become a woman who chooses herself. And that choice is final. It is powerful. It is liberating. It is the kind of choice that transforms your entire destiny. Because once you realize you don't want someone back, a new door opens, a new chapter begins, a new version of you steps forward, a version who has learned a lesson, kept a wisdom, and released the attachment. It is in that release that your life begins to align with everything you truly deserved from the beginning. Your heart becomes lighter, your spirit becomes clearer, your path becomes brighter. You return to yourself, and in returning, you no longer feel the urge to return to him. This is the final liberation. This is the quiet freedom. This is the moment where you look at the past and whisper, "Thank you, but I've outgrown this." And as you walk forward, you feel something rising inside you, a new desire, a new direction, a new calling that pulls you out of the old cycle and into a higher future. Because once you realize you don't want him back anymore, you begin wanting something far more powerful, a life that feels like peace instead of pursuit, a love that feels like home instead of hesitation, a future that feels like expansion, instead of waiting for someone to grow. So remember this, a man may return, he may beg, he may finally see your value, but the real victory is not his apology, nor his return, nor his realization. The real victory is your transformation. Because when a woman remembers her power, she no longer waits to be chosen. She chooses herself. And the moment you choose yourself, the world, and every heart that once overlooked you, begins to recognize what it lost. Breathe deeply, walk gently, and never forget, you were powerful. Long before he noticed,